The Subaru BRZ, aka Scion FRS, aka Toyota GT86, aka Toyota 86, is a car that has surprisingly changed very little during its decade-long production run. Much to the chagrin of enthusiasts, the car never received forced induction or a drastic redesign from the factory. This 2020 BRZ Performance Pack still costs around 30 grand new, and for that price, you still only get about 200 horsepower and an arguably outdated design. So why bother revisiting this car? The answer is simple. I want to find out whether it's still worth its MSRP and whether it's as enjoyable a driving experience as the similarly priced rear-wheel drive Japanese roadsters, the current Mazda MX-5 and the old but tried and true Honda S2000.
The Subaru BRZ, it's a car that's been a long time favorite of mine ever since it first came out. In fact, my very first enthusiast car was almost the very first gen 2012, maybe it was 2013 Subaru BRZ. I almost bought one, decided to get something a little bit more practical instead, but I've driven many of these over the years, but every single one I've driven has been a relatively early model year. So this one here is owned by my good friend Chris, and it's a 2020 Subaru BRZ Performance Pack. So what this actually gives you over the base BRZ is it gives you the special Sachs dampers. So we've got the 4-piston Brembo brakes up front, 328mm rotors, I believe. And we got the 2-piston rear calipers. Really consider it more of a handling package than necessarily a performance package. It's funny because when I drove the 2013 and 2014 BRZ and FRS models, the last thing that I thought the car needed was better suspension or better brakes. I think for canyon driving, the stock base setup is actually totally adequate. It gives you plenty of compliance for daily driving, but the suspension is still tuned to feel pretty flat and controlled through the corners. The car is beautifully balanced, as basically every reviewer has said over the last 9 years. And because it's a light car, sitting in around 2,800 pounds, I never thought that the base brakes actually needed to be upgraded. So I'm not really complaining, but I do find it a little bit odd that the performance pack really doesn't give you anything except what the car is already really good at, the suspension and the brakes. The engine, this FA20 2-liter flat 4 boxer from Subaru, has been only very mildly updated for this model year and a couple previous model years, I think. So yeah, 205 horsepower. It's not a whole lot of power, and I doubt you'd feel any difference between this and the early model, which had 200 horsepower. This engine still has that infamous torque dip at around 4,000 RPMs, still revs out to 7,400, so it is happy high in the rev range, and it makes a little bit over 100 horsepower per liter, so definitely a very effervescent character to this engine. This car is spec'd with a 6-speed manual transmission, very nice and notchy, short throws. The steering rack is electrically assisted, just like it's always been, and it's definitely one of the better electronic steering racks out there. Plenty of feedback. It is very, very light, which in some cars that's a con, but I think for the BRZ, it's actually a good thing because this car is pretty light and it's a very tossable front engine rear drive experience. And so yeah, you want to be able to control a car very easily, and the light steering definitely lets you do that. Now I think the two cars I'd like to compare this against today are the Mazda MX-5 Miata, and of course my favorite, the perennial favorite car of mine, the Honda S2000. This car you can buy brand new for around 30 grand. You can actually get them a little bit below MSRP now, especially since the new GR86 is coming out. So I wouldn't be surprised if you can pick this car up from a dealership nowadays for around 28 grand, which happens to be right around the same price as a clean AP2 S2000 and a few grand cheaper than an equivalent brand new ND2 Miata. So let's start pushing the car a little bit here and see if it's as fun as I remember the 2013 model being. This car is just up on its feet. It wants to dance. Got it in track mode, so it will give you a little bit of rear tire slip. And it is on the Michelin primacy tires, so they are, I want to say they're all seasons, maybe they're summer now, not sure, but either way, they're pretty low grip tires, and we're on a 215 section width on a 17-inch wheel. This car doesn't have a whole lot of grip, but then again, it doesn't really need a whole lot of grip because of its character. You just want that front engine rear drive balance, and these tires really enable you to do that. I really like the fact that it's a square setup, meaning they're 215 width tires front and rear. So overall, the balance might give you a little bit of understeer on turn-in, but it's very easy to adjust, to rotate on throttle, which is exactly what I want in a front engine rear drive car. No power below 4,000 RPM. That is foot to the floor. This engine really lives above 5,000. Just so playful. We're not going fast at all, but the car's just dancing around, and the suspension, it's really nice and lively. It's not overly stiff. You get a little bit of a roll. That's exactly what I want. So lets you just feel everything the car is doing. Easy to heel toe. Once you're up in the rev range, the throttle response is actually really nice. Yeah, these brakes are very confidence inspiring with the Performance Pack, 4-pot Brembo front calipers, plenty of stopping power. Here's what I don't like about this car, and it's been said probably thousands of times, but I think it's worth repeating. The engine. I actually really like the character of the engine. It forces you to wind it out. Yeah, the torque dip at 4,000 RPMs is annoying for daily driving and trying to pass people on the freeway. But once you're driving aggressively, you want to keep the RPMs above around 4,000 anyway, so you never really feel that torque dip. The engine revs happily all the way to 7,500. That said, it's not a good sounding engine. It sounds like just a bunch of gravel in a bucket, and you're just basically stirring it with like a shovel. Does that even make sense? I don't know, but it's got a very coarse feeling to it. As you get higher in the rev range, the rougher and rougher it sounds. That said, and I think Chris described this beautifully earlier, if you were to keep the exact character of the way the engine revs and everything and the performance, but just replaced it with like a Honda K-Series sound, no one would complain about this engine. Other than it being a little bit underpowered, yes, but the character of the engine is great. It's just the sound that lets it down for me, I think. With another 30 to 50 horsepower, the same high revving nature, another 30 to 40 foot-pounds of torque, this car would be perfect. Shifter is a little bit interesting. That second to third gear shift isn't as smooth as something like an S2000 or an ND2 Miata. Once you get used to it though, it's actually a pretty sweet shifter. Now to get this car to really rotate and oversteer a little bit on corner exit, you almost have to pitch it in. It's not a car that's all that easy to slide with just the throttle. I mean, obviously you can do it in first gear like that. Now the oil does run a little bit hot. We're at around 260 degrees Fahrenheit. A little warmer than I would like, to be honest. So for track work, yeah, you'd probably want an oil cooler, maybe a bigger radiator. But for a pure street car, this car has just been ever so slightly tweaked and honed throughout the years. And it's a pretty stout package. You get plenty of reliability. The maintenance costs are low. The small engine related issues in the early years seem to have been mostly figured out and solved. Yeah, loves to rev, not a fast car by any means, but it's all about that subjective driving experience, and this car has that in spades. I would say even compared to the ND2 Miata, which is the car I really enjoy driving, this almost feels a little bit more natural to me. This car is just so easy to drive quickly. Doesn't feel as quick as an ND2 Miata. In fact, even an ND1 Miata feels a tad punchier than this on the straights. But I think I might actually prefer the suspension of this car with the Performance Pack over the ND1 or ND2 Miatas, because those cars, the suspension setup is really soft and just the level of body roll that you get and the nosedive and the squat is just a little bit more than I'd like for a performance car. This car is just brimming with feedback. And that's not a common thing nowadays in the world of electronic this and hybrid that and electrification. I mean, this car is about as analog of a driving experience as you can get. I'm so excited to try the new GR86 when it comes out. You know, that car obviously will have the 2.4 liter flat four, which makes around 20 to 30 horsepower more than this engine, and quite a bit more torque. So I think that might be the perfect engine for the car. The question is, have they really numbed or dumbed down the level of feedback? I mean, this chassis just gives you so much information through the steering wheel, through the chassis. Really good throttle response, excellent brakes. I really have nothing bad to say about it. In a lot of ways, this car is a lot easier to drive quickly than an S2000. I think the S2000 has a far superior engine and gearbox, but something about the S2000 feels actually a little bit numb in comparison. I think the steering in the S2000, while it is very quick and direct, doesn't give you the same level of feedback as this electric rack. So do I think this car is worth the asking price of around 30 grand brand new right now? Absolutely. I think if you want just an all-around daily drivable but extremely fun to drive sports car, this is a better option than a used S2000, which is simply too hardcore in my opinion for daily driving. And it's better than the ND2 Miata just because you have so much more usability, so much more space. The rear seats fold down. You can actually fit a full set of OEM 17-inch wheels and tires in the trunk of this car with the back seats folded down. I think the ND2 will give you a little bit more performance, but I mean, I feel like we're splitting hairs here. You don't buy either car to set lap records. I mean, most people wouldn't, right? If you're just buying a car that you can drive to the track and back and have a blast while doing it, I mean, this car is about as good as it gets. So, conclusion time. Do I think this car is better than an S2000 or a brand new Miata for the money? I think if it was me and I could only have one car, this is the car I would pick hands down, no question about it.
Make no mistake about it, the 2020 Subaru BRZ might just be one of the slowest sporty cars you can buy brand new. And no, it doesn't quite match the sheer thrills of the S2000 and ND2 Miata, but it gets damn close, like really close. In my opinion, it delivers 90+% of the thrills, with the engine being the main letdown, while offering so much more usability than either roadster. The balance of daily drivability, reliability, and fun actually make the BRZ an astonishingly good value, especially if you pick up a used example for less than half the price. So that begs the question, what about the upcoming 2022 BRZ/GR86? Honestly, I wouldn't complain if it was just a reskinned version of this car with an extra 30 horsepower. When it comes to analog driver's cars in this day and age, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.